The Roman camp was drowning, wooden causeways disintegrated beneath their feet, Germanic war cries echoed through the fog-choked marshes. General Caecina Severus lay trampled in the mud, his horse dead beneath him. The legions that had conquered half the world were about to be annihilated in the same forests that had swallowed Varus and his men 7 years before. But this wasn't 9 CE, this was 15 CE, and the Romans had come back for revenge. For 3 years, Rome had done nothing. The disaster at Teutoburg Forest had been left unanswered. 3 entire legions slaughtered, their eagles taken as trophies by Germanic tribes, the empire's most humiliating defeat. But in 14 CE, everything changed. A young general named Germanicus Julius Caesar would lead the largest military expedition Rome had ever sent into Germania. His mission? Destroy Arminius, recover the lost eagles, and restore Roman honor. What followed were 3 years of the most brutal warfare the ancient world had ever seen. This is the story of Germanicus's Germanic campaigns. Winter, 14th CE. The Rhine frontier seethed with mutiny. Roman legionaries, angry at meager pay and brutal conditions, were on the verge of rebellion against the newly crowned Emperor Tiberius. Germanicus, commander of the Rhine legions and heir to the imperial throne, faced an impossible choice. He could let the mutiny spiral into civil war, or he could redirect that rage toward an external enemy. He chose war. In the dead of night, Germanicus assembled 4 legions, 12,000 men, along with 26 cohorts of auxiliaries and 8 cavalry wings. They crossed the Rhine in secret, establishing a forward base deep in hostile territory. The target? The Marsi tribe, allies of Arminius, who had helped massacre Varus's legions. The attack came during an autumn festival. The Marsi were drunk, celebrating their harvest when Roman soldiers emerged from the darkness. Germanicus split his force into 4 columns with a single order: leave nothing alive. For 50 miles, Roman legions carved through Marsi territory, men, women, children. No one was spared. The historian Tacitus called it a massacre without precedent. It was calculated terror designed to send a message: Rome had returned. But Germanicus had made a critical mistake. He had announced his presence. The Bructeri, Tubantes, and Usipetes tribes knew the Romans would have to return to Gaul. They knew the route, and they prepared an ambush that would rival Teutoburg itself. As Germanicus's army marched through the Teutoburg Forest, Germanic warriors struck the rear of the column. The auxiliary cohorts began to panic, exactly as Varus's men had 7 years before. The column compressed, discipline wavered. This was how Arminius had destroyed 3 legions. But Germanicus was not Varus. He had anticipated the attack. His army was already arranged in a defensive formation, a hollow square protecting the baggage train. When the Germanic warriors hit the auxiliaries, Germanicus personally led the 20th Legion from the rear, driving the attackers onto open ground. There, Roman discipline and superior equipment turned the battle into a slaughter. The Germanic warriors broke and fled. Germanicus had won his first real victory. Word of the massacre and the ambush spread through Germania like wildfire. The tribal coalition that Arminius had forged after Teutoburg began to fracture. Arminius himself was embroiled in a power struggle with his father-in-law Segestes, who still favored peace with Rome. Germanicus saw his opportunity. He would launch the largest invasion of Germania in Roman history. Spring 15 CE, 8 legions, over 40,000 Roman soldiers, 15,000 auxiliaries, Germanic allies. The largest Roman army assembled since the civil wars marched across the Rhine in 2 massive columns. Germanicus commanded one column. General Aulus Caecina Severus commanded the other. Their strategy was devastatingly simple: divide and destroy. Germanicus struck first at the Chatti, one of the most powerful Germanic tribes. He found and refortified his father Drusus's old fortress from 11 BCE, turning it into a forward operating base. The Chatti weren't ready for war. Their warriors fled across the Ida River, abandoning their families. Roman soldiers captured or killed everyone left behind. When the Chatti attempted to harass the Romans at the river crossing, they were driven back by a hail of javelins and arrows. Germanicus bridged the river and burned their capital Matium to the ground. Meanwhile, Caecina's column caught the Cherusci, Arminius's own tribe, attempting to reinforce the Chatti. The Cherusci were devastated, but Arminius himself escaped. On the return march, Caecina encountered the Marsi again, this time prepared for battle. Their chieftain, Malavendus, made the fatal mistake of engaging the Romans in open combat. The legions tore them apart. By late May, both columns had returned to the Rhine. They had ravaged 3 major tribes, captured thousands, and suffered minimal casualties. But Germanicus had achieved something even more valuable. He had captured Thusnelda, Arminius's pregnant wife, and Segestes, Arminius's father-in-law, delivering them safely to Roman territory. When Arminius learned his wife and unborn child were prisoners in Rome, he exploded with rage. He began assembling the largest Germanic army since Teutoburg. He would cross the Rhine and invade Gaul itself. Germanicus was already planning his response. Late summer, 15 CE. Germanicus launched a 3-pronged assault designed to shatter Arminius's coalition before it could march. Caecina led 40 cohorts and Frisian allies along the Ems River. General Statinius led another force from the south. Germanicus himself took 4 legions by sea, sailing through his father's canal into the North Sea, landing at the mouth of the Ems. The speed of the Roman advance caught the Germanic tribes completely off guard. The Bructeri abandoned their settlements and fled. In one deserted village, Roman soldiers found something that had been lost for 6 years, the eagle standard of the 19th Legion, one of the 3 legions destroyed at Teutoburg. The discovery sent shockwaves through the army. It was an omen. The gods favored Rome. But Germanicus had another objective. He ordered his forces to converge on the Teutoburg Forest itself, the site of Rome's greatest defeat. For 6 years the bodies of Varus's legionaries had lain unburied, their bones scattered across miles of forest floor. Germanic tribes had desecrated the corpses, nailing Roman skulls to trees as trophies. When the Romans reached the battlefield, veterans who had survived the massacre wept. Germanicus himself led the burial detail, personally turning the first spade of earth. A great funeral mound was constructed honoring the dead. But the ceremony was interrupted. Arminius was nearby, waiting with his army. The ambush came at a place called Arbalo, near the pass where Germanicus's father Drusus had also been attacked years before. Germanic cavalry struck the Roman advance guard, causing panic. The auxiliaries broke and fled backward into the main column, creating chaos. Arminius pressed his advantage, trying to drive the Romans into a bog, just as he had done to Varus. But Germanicus arrived with the legions in battle formation. The Germanic warriors retreated. Germanicus had snatched victory from the jaws of a second Teutoburg. With winter approaching, Germanicus divided his army for the return to Gaul. He and several legions would sail back down the Ems. The cavalry would march along the coast, but Caecina and his legions would have to march overland through the most dangerous terrain in Germania. They would barely survive. The place was called Pontes Longi, the Long Bridges. 15 years earlier, a Roman general had built wooden causeways through miles of impassable marshland. Now those causeways were rotting. Caecina's army had to stop and repair them, while Germanic warriors watched from the tree line. Then Arminius struck. He redirected streams, flooding the marsh and the Roman camp. The causeways collapsed, wagons sank into the mud, the army began to disintegrate. Soldiers abandoned their equipment trying to flee. The standards became separated from the troops. This was Teutoburg happening again. Arminius launched a full assault on the rear of the column. Caesar himself was thrown from his horse and nearly captured. Only a desperate charge by the First Legion saved the army from complete annihilation. The Romans fought their way to solid ground, but they had lost most of their supplies and equipment. That night, exhausted and starving, the soldiers panicked when a loose horse stampeded through the camp. They were about to break and run. General Caesar threw himself on the ground in the gateway of the camp, blocking the exit. He told his men they would have to step over his body to desert. The centurions restored order. Caesar gave them a simple choice: stand and fight or die running. When Arminius attacked the camp at dawn, his warriors found the ditches poorly defended and easily breached the walls. But on the other side they found the entire Roman army in battle formation, standing on solid ground outside the marsh. The Romans counterattacked, drove the Germanic warriors out of the camp, and wounded one of Arminius's key allies, Inguiomerus. The Germanic army broke. Caesar's battered legions limped back to the Rhine. Germanicus's fleet fared no better. A massive storm struck his ships along the coast, scattering them across the North Sea islands. Hundreds of men drowned, horses and equipment were lost, but the Romans had survived, and they had sent a message: Rome would not abandon Germania again. In 16 CE, Germanicus launched his final campaign. He built a fleet of over 1,000 ships, landed 6 legions deep in Germania, and finally met Arminius in open battle at Idistaviso. The Romans won a crushing victory. Germanicus erected a monument declaring all lands from the Rhine to the Elbe under Roman control. But when he returned to the Rhine, everything changed. Emperor Tiberius ordered him back to Rome immediately. Germanicus begged for 1 more year to complete the conquest. Tiberius refused. The campaigns were over. Germania would never become a Roman province, not because Arminius defeated Rome, but because Rome decided the cost was too high. Germanicus had won every major battle. He had recovered 2 of the 3 lost eagles. He had devastated the Germanic tribes. But Tiberius saw something Germanicus didn't. Germania could not be held. The forests were too dense, the tribes too numerous, the logistics too difficult. So Rome withdrew, and the Rhine became the permanent frontier of the empire. Germanicus's campaigns proved that Rome could conquer Germania. Tiberius's decision proved that Rome chose not to. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Rome's most brutal military campaigns, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more ancient history content. What do you think? Could Germanicus have conquered Germania if Tiberius had given him 1 more year? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.